Welcome to Fan-Fueled Fiction. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite games ever, Final Fantasy VII. This was one of the first real video games I ever played. Sure, I had tons of edutainment games, and some of those were really good. And I had played a handful of PC titles like Doom and Quake, but Final Fantasy VII was the first console game I ever played. So, let's start from the top. Why the name Final Fantasy when there are so many installments? Well, Final Fantasy, released back in 1987, was the last hope of a little company called Square. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, and this game was their last chance to make it as a studio. It was their final hope, their final fantasy. Luckily for them, and us as gamers, the game did so incredibly well that the company was assured a future, but the name stuck. Next, something I see asked a lot. Are the Final Fantasy games all sequels? The answer is generally no. There are a few consistent character concepts. Most games have a character named Sid, for example, and there's evidence that some of the games may take place in the same world. But for the most part, think of the games as an anthology series. You don't need to have played any of the previous games to understand Final Fantasy VII. Now, let's discuss the obvious. Why is Final Fantasy VII specifically so popular? Well, beyond a fantastic story, amazing characters, really fun combat, and awesome music, it was the first Final Fantasy game to be 3D, and was the first game in the franchise that got massive popularity in the West. The previous Final Fantasy games had only seen real massive success in Japan, but Final Fantasy VII blew people's minds around the world. Final Fantasy VII was released in 1997 on the PlayStation 1 and later PC, and it took the gaming world by storm. Produced by Squaresoft, it was, as already mentioned, the first 3D installment in the franchise. The game was so popular that it spawned several spin-offs, games set before and after the main story, and even an animated movie set 2 years after the conclusion of the game, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. More recently, a remake was released, something that fans had been demanding for ages, and in about a month, on February 29, 2024, the second part of the remake, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, will be released. Final Fantasy VII has an absolutely fantastic story. I'm not going to address much here, but if you haven't played it, please consider doing so. It's fairly cheap on Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, and even modern smartphones. It employs a timed, turn-based battle system, so you don't need the quick reflexes or skill with a controller that many other games require. It's really a game that anyone can pick up, regardless of their familiarity with video games. The story of Final Fantasy VII follows mercenary Cloud Strife as he fights alongside friends to help save the planet from the corrupt Shinra Company, who are using the planet's life force itself to power their special Mako reactors to provide the world power. And one of the most iconic villains in fictional history, Sephiroth. There are 9 playable characters total, and in the coming weeks I'm going to make videos discussing each of them. Each character has their own weapon type and method of combat. Cloud uses giant swords, Barret uses guns, Sid uses spears, and so on. In addition, each character has their own set of special abilities known as limit breaks, which are special powers that can have a number of effects. On top of that, there's a magic system, one of my favorites in all of gaming, that uses materia, crystallized orbs of the planet's knowledge, allowing the holder to cast the spell contained within. The music of Final Fantasy VII, like many of the Final Fantasy games, was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, and each and every one of the songs is fantastic. The 2 most iconic of the game's songs, however, are the theme of party member Aerith Gainsborough and Sephiroth's final theme, One Winged Angel. The game progresses similarly to many other role-playing games. As you progress, you recruit new characters to your team, gain more power through leveling up, and discover new abilities while progressing along the story. The game has a vast open world. You can wander all around Gaia, traveling to towns and villages, meeting the inhabitants, and later in the game you even get vehicles to soar through the sky and even explore the depths of the ocean. Final Fantasy VII has consistently garnered exceptional critical reception. Across 49 reviews, it has an average score of 97%, and 26 of those are perfect scores. Even today, 27 years after its release, it still holds up as an incredible feat of story writing and character development. In my upcoming videos, I'll be discussing the characters, the monsters, the magic, and more, but I will always be sure to put up spoiler warnings before getting into anything that could really spoil the story. Again, I urge you, if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, go get a copy. It's available for pretty much every platform, even modern smartphones. The game tells one of the greatest stories in gaming history. Thanks for watching! In the next video, I'll be addressing the primary protagonist, the legendary Merc himself, Cloud Strife. If you liked this video, there's more on the way. Please consider liking the video, commenting, and hitting that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds for you and really helps the channel out. See you in the next one.